Smoke, smoke, smoke that cigarette. Puff, 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 and if you smoke yourself to death, tell St. Peter at the Golden Gate that you hate to make him wait, but you've got to have another cigarette.
Here, Mrs. Davy. Yes, my dear. We were sitting outside Lewis's house for a change. Lewis, Bobby, and me. Lewis's mother stood in her doorway in her floral pinny, leaning against the frame with her arms folded. Lewis's mother always seemed older than my mother, although I don't think she was. It was a beautiful summer day, but Lewis's side of the street always seemed to be in shadow. You know that black banana what Bobby's eating? Yes, my dear. I don't like they. How come, David? They're good for ye, they are. I like 'em all right, said Bobby, biting into the hard black grainy stick. I could hear it crack as he bit into it. They taste horrible, and they look like a bit of dog turd, I said. Oh, David, you maze bugger, laughed Mrs. Davy. Bobby turned his nose up at the black banana and put it into his pocket. Well, what I'd reckon is this here. I'd reckon that the Germans have sent they things over here, and they have put poison in them, so that all we English are going to eat them, and then we're all going to die in agony, and then they're going to come over and then take over the country and that, and kill us and all, and then they'll have won the war. Bobby took the black dried banana out of his pocket and threw it in the gutter. Do you think that the Germans have poisoned them, Mrs. Davy? Maybe so, my dear, said Lewis's mother. Maybe so. The three of us moved across the street to sit in the sun. Lewis, don't sit on that pavement, said his mother. You'll get piles. Anyhow, what we going to do, said Bobby. Let's go up and see the Yanks, said Louie. What's that? I asked. You know, said Louie, the Yanks. They're soldiers and they come from America. Guess out of it. There aren't no What you just said? There bloody are, said Louie. Aren't there, Bob? Yeah, said Bobby. They're up Albert Terrace. And they're soldiers and they got guns and they give you sweets and chewing gum and that. My brother told me. Chewing gum? Yeah, stacks of it. Come on, Whiteo, let's go. Lewis and Bobby were already running up the street. I ran to catch them up. Just as they were turning the corner by the chip shop, Bobby bent down to the pavement. Hey, look! Here's some chewing gum here. He bent down to pick up a piece of sticky stuff that had been trodden into the stone. As he pulled it up, it stretched up in his hand like a bowstring. He rolled it between his dirty fingers and then put it in his mouth. Is it supposed to be black like that? I asked. What's it like? Asked Louie. Great. Want some? Bobby pulled a long string of the chewing gum from his mouth and then gave me and Louie a piece each, and we continued around the corner, 3 gum chewers, and walked into Albert Terrace. We were met by the sight of Goblin, one of the gang, who was 3 years older than us, sitting in the driving seat of a strange-looking vehicle, like a car with the roof cut off. It was khaki-coloured, with numbers painting on the side in white. You! Louie! Whiteo! Here, look what I'm a-doing of. What's that? It's a jeep, said Goblin. These here Yanks are going to take it to Germany and kill hundreds of Germans with it. They're going to put a Tommy gun on the front and they can mow 'em down dead. This bloke here said I can fire the gun when they get it. Perhaps we can take it over Newlyn and kill the Newlyn gang. We saw, standing beside the funny-looking car, the strangest-looking man I had ever seen. He seemed as tall as a giant. His face was big and brown, and he had freckles all over his face. His eyes were the brightest blue I had ever seen, and his blonde hair was cropped short on his head. It was like no other haircut I had seen before. He was so clean that he seemed to sparkle, and his uniform was made of a shiny material that didn't look anything like the rough uniforms that we had seen on English soldiers. He smiled at us. "Oh, howdy, you all." We looked at him, mouths open. "Eh? How you good old boys doing?" He could have been speaking Serbo-Croat for all we understood of him. "You American, are you, mister?" "What's that you say, boy?" "Eh?" "I couldn't make out your limey lingo." "What's he saying, Whiteo?" Eventually, after much miscommunication and gifts of sweets and chewing gum, that was actually white in colour, and not the dirty black that we had picked off the street, we tuned into each other's speech sufficiently to make a fair stab at what we each were saying. The American turned to Louie. "You want another stick of gum, boy?" "Yeah," said Louie. As he handed over the gum, the giant said, "You got a sister, boy?" "Yeah. She's called Hilda." "Hilda, eh? Well, you tell Hilda to come up and see Jerry the Texan, and I'll make sure she'll get some nylons. How old is she?" "6, said Louie. The blonde giant coughed and said, "Yeah, well, you know." "Where you come from, mister?" "Well, boy, I come from Texas. We call it God's own country. It's the greenest, most beautiful place on this earth. The corn grows as high as a tree, and the skyscrapers reach up to the sky." "Is it bigger than Truro?" said Bobby. "Why, hell, boy, it's bigger than this whole country put together. My daddy's ranch stretches out as far as the horizon out there." He pointed out to Mounts Bay. "And when you think you got to the end, it goes on as far again." We knew he was just bragging now, because nothing could be bigger than Mounts Bay. By now some other soldiers had come out of the house to join him. They were all shiny, clean, crew-cutted giants as well. "Do you know any film stars, mister?" asked Bobby. "Why, sure. Clark Gable's my uncle." "Who's he?" asked Bobby. "Why, hell, boy, don't you know Clark Gable? He's the king of Hollywood. Ain't that so, Gus?" the Texan said to one of the newcomers. "Yup." "Well, he ain't as good as our king," said Bobby. "Do you know Hopalong Cassidy?" I asked him. "I sure do. In fact, I taught him how to ride a horse and tote a gun. Ain't that so, Gus?" "Yup." "Yeah, I bet. Well, what's his horse called then?" "Why, Hoppy's horse is called Trigger. Ain't that so, Gus?" "Yup." "Where, you lying bugger. Trigger is Roy Rogers' horse." Suddenly, one of the Americans yelled out, "Hey there, boy! What the hell you think you're doing?" Followed by the others, he started running towards the jeep, where Goblin was sitting behind the driving wheel and the jeep was careering down the hill. "That kid has only left the handbrake off." The jeep was now travelling at quite a speed, and Goblin stared into the top of Adelaide Street and disappeared around the corner. The jeep was now travelling at quite a speed, and Goblin steered into the top of Adelaide Street and disappeared around the corner. Me and Louie and Bobby ran after the Americans, who were running after the jeep driven by Goblin, with his unruly hair flying back in the wind. We watched him come to the junction between Adelaide Street and Penwith Street, where he threw his hands up in the air and the jeep crashed into the corner house. A couple of seconds later, Mr. Tonkin came running out of the house and started cursing the Americans. Goblin jumped out of the jeep and made to run down to Camberwell Street. But one of the giant Americans caught him by the scruff of the neck, saying, "Not so fast, young'un." Another American got into the jeep, and reversed it up the street back to Albert Terrace. "You ain't going to tell the police, are you, mister?" I pleaded with the Texan. "Or his ma," said Bobby. "She'll kill him." "I don't rightly know what we're going to do," said the giant. "We can't just let him go. He's got to realize that he can't just drive off other people's property." "Why don't you just beat the shit out of him?" said Bobby, who always had a practical solution. "I've got myself an idea of what to do," said the Texan. "You boys had better get home now, before any more damage is done." And so we went home. The next time we saw Goblin, we could hardly recognize him. His unruly shock of dirty hair was gone. Instead, his head looked practically bald. The Americans had shaved his hair to about 1/8 of an inch of his head. His mother never said anything. Probably she never noticed. But from then on, his name in the gang would forever be Ballnut. The next day, we were up at Albert Terrace again. But I'll tell you about that later.